Today we'll be making our fabulous caramel apple French toast. It could be pronounced caramel or caramel. Different people say it different ways, so either one is fine. Our ingredients today are 2 eggs, 1/3 of a cup of milk, 1/8 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 tablespoon of butter, 6 slices of bread, and 2 small Granny Smith apples. The sauce, the caramel sauce, is 1/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar, 1/8 of a cup of butter, and 1.5 teaspoons of light corn syrup. Okay, so I'm going to be starting today by cracking the eggs into the mixing bowl and whisking them together. Okay. So you can use your small mixing bowl. Since there's nothing else in the bowl, I will go ahead and crack them straight into here. If I have to mix eggs in with other ingredients, I will usually crack them into the prep cup. I had previously washed my hands before we started the video. As always, we start with washing our hands, but I had just done that before the video started rolling. I can use my whisk to break the yolks. When you whisk something, you're not stirring it with the whisk like this. It's just a little bit of a flick of your wrist until it's combined. Okay. Set my whisk to the side. Then I'm going to add my 1/8 of a teaspoon of both cinnamon and nutmeg. So the 1/8 of a teaspoon is your smallest one. And here is the cinnamon. And this recipe isn't baking, it's cooking, so we're going to be as close as we can. And then I need 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. If you don't have nutmeg at home, nutmeg is kind of an expensive spice. If you don't have it at home, you can make the French toast with just cinnamon. You can actually make the French toast with no cinnamon, but it has just a better flavor if you add the cinnamon and nutmeg. And then you need your milk. You need 1/3 of a cup of milk. Now, the way to properly measure milk is not in a dry measuring cup, but in a liquid measuring cup. And you want that measuring cup up at your eyeball. If you're not comfortable with that, you can set it down and get right down on eye level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it up like this. I'm going to slowly pour until I get to 1/3 of a cup. I'm going to add that in. And then I'm just going to whisk a little bit more to combine the cinnamon, the nutmeg, the egg, and the milk. Now the next step I'm going to take is I'm going to add this, I'm going to transfer this to a pie plate. The reason that I do that is because a pie plate is nice and flat, and when I go to dip my bread pieces in there, they dip nice and easily. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to be doing, while the chef is doing this part, the sous chef can be chopping up the apples. Okay? Depending on how comfortable you are with the knife, you may use either your large knife or you may use a smaller utility knife, whichever one you're comfortable with. Now, the first thing that we want to do when we cut is you always want to have your hand in a claw position. You want to slice like this, and then you want to slice to the side, slice this way, and then you want to slice like that, so that you've cut your core right off. Okay? So you're going to do that with both of the apples. Then you're going to throw both of the apple cores away, and you're going to proceed to set your apple on the flat side down. Okay, like that. And then you can slice it. You don't need to have them in super small pieces, but the smaller the pieces, the better for when you go to eat your French toast. So again, the sous chef would be doing the chopping. So the chef would be getting the French toast ready while the sous chef is getting the apples ready. In this particular recipe, the kitchen assistant will get the caramel sauce ready. So everyone has a part in making the recipe. The reason that we put the flat side of the apple down is so that it doesn't rock. Okay? We don't want to have it like this and try to cut because it will rock and you could very easily cut yourself. Always being careful. Make sure that when your eyes come up, your knife stops. Never keep cutting while you're looking away. We're doing 2 full apples on this. You can do 1 apple or an apple and a half, and it's usually plenty. But the more apples you have, the healthier it is. Because remember, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So we're going to finish cutting those up, and then I will just set those aside to be used when the rest of the recipe is finished. And just leave them there. Okay? In the meantime, your bread should be cut in half. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and turn on my griddle. Now when you're turning on a griddle, you want to turn both burners on because the burners, and I like to turn them to about 4.5. Okay? You're going to let that get nice and hot before you add your bread to it. This is a serrated knife. Notice that there's like little scallops, edges. This is the best type of knife to use to cut bread. You want to use kind of a sawing motion, and that way it doesn't tear the bread. If you use another kind of knife, it may tear the bread rather than cutting it. Okay? You don't want your bread all smashed. And I'm using whole wheat bread, but you can use white bread, you can use 7-grain bread, you can use whatever kind of bread you would like for this recipe. You do not have to have fresh bread for the recipe. That's one of the best parts. Okay, before I put that on, I'm going to get the ingredients in for my caramel sauce. Okay? The first ingredient is the butter. Make sure that you take the paper off. Then we need a 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar. And I'm going to get this ready. Like I said, 2 people will be doing this, so it will be much easier if everyone works together in their kitchen. It's much easier. Again, we're going to pack that down. Okay. And this has not been turned on yet. We want that to stay off until our French toast is getting close to being done, actually about half done. So I'm going to measure out my light corn syrup, okay, and I need 1.5 teaspoons. So that would be about 7.5 grams. There we go. Oh, I went a little bit over. That's okay. So now this is nice and hot. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my tablespoon of butter. I'm going to remove the paper from it. And I'm going to I'm going to use my tongs for my bread. Okay, so I'm going to use this, and I'm just going to, oh, that's not going to fit in there. Just use a regular spatula. And you'll hear it sizzling, so that means that it's ready to go. You want to spread that all around. The reason that we use this is to add flavor and also so that the French toast does not stick. You don't want to spread your butter too soon. You want to spread your butter right as you're about to put your French toast on. So all you do is you use your small tongs and you dip it in. If you let the bread sit too long, what happens is that it soaks up all of the egg mixture, and then you don't have enough for all of your bread. So you just want to put it in and flip it. Notice that I'm kind of holding this over the stove. The reason for that is that way you just kind of gently place them on the griddle. And as you can see, I'm starting to run low on the mixture. I've got to be careful because you want each one coated. And it's going to be about perfect. You want to use up every bit of your egg mixture. Till it's gone. Okay. Now, in the meantime, we can turn this on very, very low as soon as these are ready to flip. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to use my tongs and I want to look at those first ones that I did. Nope, they're not ready yet. Give them another minute. Sometimes it'll cook a little bit faster in certain areas. The burner's here and the burner's there. The burner is not in the center, even though the pan is hot. So sometimes these pieces here will take a little longer to cook, and so you can kind of move the order of things around. Okay. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit. Okay. And in the meantime, we could use all kinds of fruit to top French toast. I just decided to do a caramel apple theme because I love caramel apples. But you could actually do strawberries, blueberries, any type that you would like to do. Any kind of fruit works. Okay, I'm gonna check these. I think I can start to turn them over. Yep, they're getting done. They should have that golden brown look to them. Okay, and as soon as the chef flips these over, that is when we want to start our caramel sauce. Okay, now while those are finishing up, the assistant, the kitchen assistant, is going to be continually stirring the caramel sauce. You don't let it sit because it's sugar. and corn syrup, it will burn very, very quickly. Okay, so you just want to have the assistant in your group continue to stir. And as the butter melts, it looks more and more like a caramel sauce. Meanwhile, the chef would be checking these, making sure that they're not getting too done. No, they're fine. Very close to needing to come off. Okay. Because I'm just one person doing this, it's a little bit harder for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move these. Yep, those look good. I'm making sure that they're all finished nicely. Sometimes you'll flip them for a third time, and sometimes just flipping them once works. Now, while I do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the burners off. That will kind of stop the cooking. They'll cook a little bit because the pan is still hot. Okay. And I'm going to let this continue to simmer a little bit, and the sauce will get thicker and thicker as it simmers. It will start to bubble, and that's how you know it's about ready. As soon as it starts to bubble just a little bit, turn your heat off and move it to the back burner. Okay. In the meantime, you're going to go ahead and put your French toast into the boats. 1, 2, 3 pieces in each boat. And then once you get that finished, you will, oh, it's turned out perfect. You will take these over and you will add the Granny Smith apples to the top. Like that. And as with other things, some people will like a lot of apples, some people will only like a few apples. You want to divide them up as evenly as possible, with each person getting about a half of an apple. Okay, so once you do that, then you can bring your caramel sauce over here, and you're just going to drizzle it onto the top. The right consistency drizzles nice and easily. If we overcook caramel, it burns very quickly, and when it burns, it gets super hard, and it will harden onto your French toast, and it will make it really hard to actually take a bite of the French toast. And that's today's cooking lesson. That is our caramel apple French toast. Thanks for joining me.